Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Paul Brody, Global Blockchain Leader at EY. We're going to talk about the intersection of AI and blockchain. We're also going to learn about Ethereum for business and the usage for organizations. Paul, it is great to see you as always, particularly in person. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about when AI and blockchain merge. You say to expect the boring at first.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Large enterprises, the way they think about kind of working at scale is that they really try to standardize process and massively ramp it up. That's how we have chain stores and business networks with thousands of locations. So enterprises are going to be very careful about how they adopt AI because they don't want to break existing process. And if you spent any time playing around with some of these really cool things, these generative pre-trained transformers, these GPTs, what you know is that given slightly different question, they can give you a really different answer. And that's a kind of variability which is cool for generating ideas or coming up with neat stuff. It's really bad for business processes that want predictable, very predictable and understandable outcomes. So it's going to take a little bit of time, and we're going to start with the things that feel comfortable and predictable.
Where do you think it will see the most success?
So in the short term, I would say there's a few key things, right? Number one, software development. This is a great process. GPTs seem to be really, really good at writing stuff that's mostly correct and predictable. And because of the way software works, you can prompt a system to make some software for you, then you can test it and edit it, and then you can put it in production. So software development is one of the really, really good, well-proven use cases. Another one that's going to be incredibly successful is basically kind of user interfaces and tech support, because you can type into a GPT, hey, this is the error message I'm getting, or this is the problem I'm having, please step me through it. So I expect to see a couple of areas like that go really, really quickly. Or interpreting data as a part of analytics, but I see some of the other stuff around process integration going a bit more slowly.
It's interesting you say that because the question is, oh, is this going to replace my job? What are your thoughts around that? I feel like humans still need to be there to execute and to make sure that the redundancies are in place and that you're getting the right answers from generative AI.
So people forget, we've had moments like this before,
right,
over and over again. Think about agriculture. If you go back a century, agriculture was 50% of the workforce. Today it's 1%, and still, nobody's really lost their jobs. They have moved on, the jobs have changed. We saw a lot of this with infrastructure and computing revolution. We are, for good part is, we are very, very good at moving on to the next thing and taking advantage of productivity. The bad part is we're also really good at just creating more work, right? So if somebody does something or a machine does something for us, then we spend more time on quality control or editing or variations.
Let's switch gears to another area of how blockchains can be implemented, ESG, of course, which tends to be a bit arbitrary. So now we have to think about quantifying our efforts within the climate space. Tell us about OMSchain ESG.
So quantification of carbon footprints and carbon offsets is going to be hugely important. It's immensely controversial because there's a lot of disagreement today about, well, how should I measure my emissions, or what qualifies as a reasonable carbon offset? So there's a lot of uncertainty. However, everyone is starting to prepare for this future where we will have a couple of things that are useful. Number one, we will have a bit more certainty. It won't be perfect, and there'll be a lot of criticism, but governments and regulators are going to start defining what is an acceptable offset. How are you allowed to define your emissions? As that approaches, you're also going to see countries and regions like the European Union imposing carbon frontiers. And so OMSchain ESG is a tool set that's really designed for enterprises to do two things. Number one, publicly and visibly track their carbon output and offsets, because remember, lots and lots of companies have made commitments to be carbon neutral. But secondly, and this is the big driver here, as you approach, if you want to bring product into a country, there may be a carbon tax. You have to be able to explain in very good detail, what's the carbon on this product? And so with OMSchain ESG, companies will be able to not only track their total carbon, but very importantly, they'll be able to allocate both the carbon and the offsets to individual products, so that on each product basis, if it's imported into the EU, for example, or exported to another country, you'll have a full history and traceability of all the carbon related to that item.
Let's talk about your new book.
Oh,
your
thank you.
First book, congratulations, Ethereum for Business, and this discusses the commercial use of Ethereum. Tell us the background behind it.
So I got really, I've wanted to write a book for a long time. I had a little trouble sort of getting it started last year. And then all of a sudden, the University of Arkansas came to the rescue. They said they would be interested in publishing this book that I had been thinking about. And so I got going, and I started in December. But the goal really is to be able to explain in plain English why you should be using Ethereum. Not just blockchains in general, but why specifically Ethereum, why the public blockchain of Ethereum, and why for non-technical users, how these particular business use cases make sense. Carbon footprints like we just talked about, but also supply chain, procurement, global trade, payments, asset management, all of these things that enterprises are looking at, I've been working on for almost a decade now. I wanted to package it up in plain English language and make it accessible for business executives.
On a high level, so that we give away all the goodies in the book, why Ethereum?
Very simply, why Ethereum? A couple of reasons. Number one, it's a public decentralized network. And the value proposition of a public decentralized system is that there's no one party controlling the system. And that is incredibly important. If you think about how companies want to transact with each other, the one thing that they really don't want to do is end up with the company operating, say, a digital marketplace becoming their competitor or deciding to kind of tax their transactions. That's the first really important reason, this decentralization, no entity in control fully. Secondly, everybody wants to use something that has the best available public standard, and Ethereum fits that bill. It's not the best blockchain, and we could have endless arguments about what the best blockchain is, but it is the one that is most widely used. So if you want to use a blockchain that other companies are likely to use and which has lots of customers on it, then just make the easy choice, which is to go with the biggest public network, which is Ethereum.
All right, Paul, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.